Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Dave Karpf. Dave, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Dave Karp. I'm an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. I study internet politics, which for the first probably 8 years of my career meant studying groups like MoveOn.org and how political advocacy was changing in the digital era. And then for the past 4 years, I have mostly been studying broader internet culture and finding ways to make fun of people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, which keeps me old.
Okay, so that will be our topic today. So we're recording this on the afternoon of November 4th, 2022, and events are unfolding so quickly that it's possible that things may happen while we're having this conversation or shortly thereafterwards, but we'll try to capture the moment. So Elon Musk.
Yeah, can I just point out there, I'm a political scientist. It is the Friday before election day. And the thing that really I want to be talking about, and I'm spending all my time talking about, is Elon Musk. Like, that's how much mind share he's taking up. It's Friday before election day. And as a political
Great
scientist,
point. Yeah.
My God.
Yeah, the election is in, like 96 hours or something. And I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty involving the election and maybe less uncertainty about what's happening with Twitter right now. Because, okay, so when it was first announced that Musk was putting in a bid for Twitter, I remember thinking, okay, this will either be ultimately good because Twitter as a website or software or app has a lot of problems. It doesn't really work very well. And maybe he'll actually like make some decisions and hire people who will improve the service of this product that I use, even though it's not the most pleasant user experience. Or maybe he'll unintentionally destroy the company, run it into the ground. And that would be good for me personally because I would break my Twitter addiction and be good for the world because I think Twitter has had a negative influence on America and the world. So I was sort of like, well, maybe, there's sort of an upside either way. I had a conversation with Max Reed 6 or so months ago, who was making the case that actually Twitter as it existed when Elon put in his bid worked very well for one person, Elon Musk, because he could hype up his company and his stock price for Tesla was going up, 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 and he gets a lot of attention and adoration from his super fans. So Max was making the case that actually probably not that much would change at all at Twitter because it works for Elon and he would be the boss. So I guess things that have happened in the intervening time was Musk wanted to, go back on the deal, and there was a lot of back and forth, and ultimately, I guess, it went to this chancery court in Delaware, but to avert a trial and maybe further embarrassment of like discovery, Musk just decided he would pay the original price of 54.20 per share. And what else seemed to happen is that the tech bubble seems to have finally burst.
Yeah.
And so the underlying, things have shifted in the world and our understanding of how much Musk actually wanted to do this thing. And now he's firmly in charge of the site. And it seems like a lot of chaotic things are happening at Twitter headquarters. You've been watching this spectacle unfold. You wrote a piece for your Substack, which we'll link to, Elon's Twitter tilt. And your Substack is davekarpf.substack.com. If people want to check out your writing in general. Okay, so I spoke a lot there. What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, so let's go back to April for a second, because I remember writing about it as he announced the acquisition plan. I remember he announced that he was going to try to buy Twitter, and then he immediately went on the TED the TED Talk stage and got this like puffed up interview, which amongst other things, he made clear that he really likes Douglas Adams and has not read Douglas Adams very clearly. But so I wrote a piece then, and my expectation then was that he was probably going to ruin Twitter slowly. And I say that as somebody who likes Twitter, who Twitter has generally been good to. Some of your listeners might remember 2019. I had like a week of Twitter fame back then because I made fun of Brett Stevens and he got mad at me, and then everyone made fun of Brett Stevens. That was the Brett bug thing. That was me. So like I have liked Twitter over the years, and the thing that I have liked about Twitter, I think, is that it has always been pretty bad at making money.
Right.
So like elsewhere in like my actual research, one of the themes that I've been working out, studying the history of the digital future, is that big money ruins everything. And that's not to say that monetization is always bad, but the incentives that go into astronomically large money end up warping things and making them bad. So like I think that YouTube in 2008 is better than YouTube today. As the money has gotten bigger, we've gotten these weird influencer cultures that are, I think, bad.
Mhm.
And part of what I think has made Twitter better than other platforms, I mean, like, I'm not going to say that Twitter 6 months ago was great for everyone. Like, I'm a cis white dude. Like, of course, it's better for me. But I think Twitter, compared to other platforms, has been pretty good. And I think that is related to Twitter always being more of an influential place than a place that makes a lot of money. Like, I think them being bad at monetization has been good for it. Like, it's good that, like, when I got kind of Twitter famous with Brett Stevens, that meant nothing. Like, I didn't get verified. I didn't like make money off of, like, there was no money that came to me. A couple times in that, people were like, "Oh, people should buy Dave's book," and I was like, "You're right. If you want to support me, buy my book." Something like 50,000 people liked that tweet of mine, and I think I sold like maybe 11 books.
Mhm.
Like, Twitter's just not good for monetization, and I think that has actually made it a healthier place than a lot of the other nationalized and globalized social media. So my initial reaction was, yeah, this is probably going to be bad, because if he comes in and makes it good at monetization, that'll actually ruin some of the things that we underappreciate right now. Um, but I didn't expect it would be anything like the chaos that we've gotten. And what's changed is the tech crash happens, it starts a couple weeks after he makes that offer. And what looked like a blip is now clearly a real decline in the tech sector for the first time since the dot-com crash. There's a really nice New York Times piece that came out like maybe a month before it all went down, that was titled "The Tech Bubble That Never Burst." And they've got great graphics in it, showing how, year after year for 18 years, there were predictions from smart people in the tech sector saying, like, yeah, like, this is a bubble and it's about to come apart. And it just never does. Like 2008, it doesn't. Like, somehow in the pandemic, tech got bigger because it turned out that that's where all the money went, because where else would it go?
Mhm.
So at all times, the bubble has just kept expanding. And if you had said to me back in March, like, do you think the bubble will finally burst? I would have been like, haha, no. Like, I don't see how it can keep going, but I don't see why it would stop. And Elon got kind of unlucky that just after he decided to pay 54.20 per share, the value of Twitter, which was probably, I don't know if it was $44 billion, which is what he paid, but it was probably in or like maybe 35 to 40 billion is probably what it was worth. And that sets up a theory for him of, hey, that's what it's worth. And everyone knows that this isn't a well monetized, well run institution. I can go in, I can spend a year or two flipping it for profit, and that'll further burnish the legend of Elon Musk. Like, I don't think that would have worked, but I can see why he would have believed that.
Mhm.
And then, like, every single tech stock has since then lost between a third and 2/3 of its value. So now he's got like a $15 billion company that he paid $44 billion for. Of course, he tried to get out of the deal. And of course, Delaware Chancery Court was like, yeah, no, contracts are real things. You don't get to do that. So then he
Okay,
buys that thing.
why do you think he did not just bail and pay the $1 billion or whatever breakup fee? What do you think it was
Oh,
just his hubris and his self-conception?
no, I like that. Legally, he couldn't. So Matt Levine is a Bloomberg columnist who, his newsletter is called Money Stuff. I've been reading it religiously ever since the Elon stuff. Um, the breakup fee was if, like, the banks bailed on him and he couldn't go through with it. But he couldn't just do $1 billion breakup fee because he decided he wanted to walk away. The lawsuit from Twitter was saying, you need a reason to walk away. You can't just walk away from a deal you signed, particularly because the company's worth less now. So the lawsuit wasn't for $1 billion. The lawsuit was for the full 44 billion. Now, if we had talked like in September, the thing that I was rooting for and that I thought would probably happen is that Delaware Chancery Court would say, yeah, you have to pay $44 billion for a company that you don't want and that doesn't want you. And like, after that decision got made, he would then have to walk into a room with them and probably reach a settlement saying, like, okay, instead of paying $44 billion to own the company that I don't want, we're going to agree that I'll pay you $20 billion to break the contract, and I'll pay $20 billion to not own Twitter, which would have been awesome because, like, I pay $0 to not own Twitter. Like, that would have been hilarious.
Right, but
Um,
okay, no, I okay, I this parts of this I barely understand, but I mean, before he did the like takeover bid or private equity move, he like assembled like 15% of the stock that he owned anyway. So like he still would have had that and like would have had a seat on the board, presumably, and could have thrown his weight around. And like, is the Delaware Chancery Court going to like they don't throw people in jail? I assume like it's something lawyers would have worked it out.
I mean, they can't throw people in jail, but they can say you have to pay that, and if you don't, then we're gonna like, I don't know if Tesla's a Delaware corporation. It probably is because all companies are Delaware
Hmm.
companies. But like a thing that I heard pointed out a lot by like business press, which is not what I usually read, but I'm like starting to read them religiously because I was really into following this court case. And I think they were kind of pointing out is like Elon Musk is very used to fighting with the SEC. And when the SEC says you have to do this, Elon Musk can be like, what are you going to fucking do? And then he just kind of gets away with like they just
He
maybe they
he
fought
pays a
all over
fine
the
that
book.
for
Yeah.
him is nominal.
Yeah, and like that, like I saw a there was a meme going on around for a while. The image from Thor 3 where the villain is like, "You can't defeat me," and then Thor's like, "I can't, but he can," and then like the monster shows up in the background. And so like the meme was going around of like him saying that, and the SEC says like, "I can't, but he can," and it's like contract law because like
Uh-huh.
you just cannot met like you. It turns out you like can't mess with the Delaware Chancery Court the way you can mess with the SEC. And he spent a few months like trying to make that work, and when it became really clear that you have absolutely nothing here, they're gonna force you to buy the company or like settle for a gigantic sum of money to not own the company. That
Hmm.
at that point he was like, well fine, I'll just own the company. So like he came out what like 3 weeks ago being like, you know what guys, actually why don't I buy the company just like I said I would. And they
Okay.
were like, all right, show us the money, fine. And still most tech journalists were like, he's not going to do it, like he'll find a way out of it, and then he didn't. He bought it a
Right. I
week ago.
mean, if he really did want to get out of it, I assume he could have like, like the banks could have just not come through, and
Nope,
like this seems like a
nope.
pretty risky bet. So that could have happened even without Elon saying sotto voce, like, guys, let's scuttle this fucking disaster. So I get,
So like I like this was like I was following this religiously again in October because people clearly thought of that move, and the answer is if the banks quietly say like, oh, never mind, it's not a good deal anymore, then Twitter sues the banks and the banks lose, and then they have to go through like
banks
the
have more money
Delaware
than
is very
even though Elon
serious
Musk
about
is the richest man on earth, banks have more
well,
money than Elon Musk does, I think.
right. I like the bottom line is like Delaware is very like the only thing that Delaware is good for is like corporate law. And so Delaware's really, really serious about like if you sign a contract saying you're gonna do a merger, you don't get to like get excuses to get out of it. Like we're very serious about these contracts and like them never having wiggle room, even if you're Elon.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, like he tried everything and it was just kind of like, oh shit, I guess this is real, and I guess I own Twitter now. And he's like a petulant child who's very mad that he's down like $30 billion because of his stupid purchase.
Right. Okay. And this is something I noted on that conversation I had with Max Reed
Mhm,
in the spring. Um, Tesla stock, its bottom over the past couple years was March 20th, 2020, and then it's gone up since then. So it became like a meme stock,
yep.
like week 2 of lockdown and seemingly unconnected from profits. Although I guess Tesla has done better than it did the past previous years, but Musk's position as richest person on earth is because of Tesla stock becoming wildly inflated from what market fundamentals would say it's actually worth.
Yeah.
Um, and it has, I guess its peak was November 5th, and now it's down about 50% from
Mhm.
that peak. So yeah, okay. So let's talk about now what's been happening over the past couple days, which is Musk has laid off about half of Twitter's workforce.
Mhm.
Um, and it seems pretty chaotic there, and he's tried to implement various new products to be built extremely quickly. And yeah, it's treating it. I saw someone describe it as like they're making the engineers work like, this is a startup that's about to go out of business if they don't debut their product, within 36 hours, sort of thing. So he's lighting a fire under people's asses in his sort of sociopathic way. And the company's leaking like crazy to the press. So we're finding out it's just like more than the Trump White House
Yeah. Yeah.
leaked because there's way more people there, and I guess some people in the Trump White House like Trump a little bit. It doesn't seem like many people at Twitter like Musk very much. So everything is coming out as it's happening,
Mhm.
and yeah, it seems possible that the site could just be knocked offline through not enough people being there to keep it going.
Not having engineers, yeah, that could be a problem. I joked today that he spent $44 billion to bring back the fail whale.
Yeah, were you on Twitter in those early days when like it was constantly going offline, and yeah,
Yeah.
this image of
Yeah,
a
I think I
whale would
joined it like
appear.
07 or '08. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always been a a website or app or whatever that didn't work particularly well. It definitely
Mhm.
has gotten more stable such that it doesn't go down as much as it did in 2011. But yeah, so that seems like that sort of thing could return. But yeah, so what are you thinking about Elon's choices over the past week or so?
So yeah, so I just wrote a piece arguing that this is the same behavior as like a gambler at a poker table who loses some money and then kind of like loses their temper and starts playing in an undisciplined manner to try to win all their money back all at once. Like I've played a lot of poker's my like big hobby, and I've like played a lot of it over the decades. And you see this happen where someone will be like a pretty good card player, and then they get kind of unlucky, and like then they're not a good card player anymore. And that is how he's acting. Where like it's a private company now, and what part of what being a private company means is he doesn't need to make a bunch of fast moves to like impress Wall Street analysts or like the stock market that he's got a plan. Like he owns the thing. He's down a bunch of money, but like he owes like $1 billion in debt payment in debt financing every year for Twitter now because of the 13 billion that he borrowed from banks. But like that's not due tomorrow. Like
Right.
he doesn't need to turn it around overnight, except he's pissed off that he spent all this money. And what that's leading to, I mean, he's acting like I just spent $44 billion on this place, and this is your problem. And like that's spooking advertisers. So now advertisers are saying, yeah, we're gonna hit pause on advertising on Twitter because we don't trust that this place isn't gonna fall to shit, and we're gonna end up having our like Nike ads running next to a Nazi. Like we don't want that. So hey,
Mhm.
convince us. He's not doing himself any favors with the like the conspiracy theory he tweeted about Paul Pelosi over the weekend either.
Yeah.
Um, but what really stands out is his verification plans. So they've had this product for a while called Twitter Blue, which is $5 a month for a bunch of features, including the ability to edit your tweets for like 15 minutes after you post. And like I don't have Twitter Blue, but I've thought about it a lot because I tweet a lot, and like when I notice that I have a typo, it interferes with my
Yeah,
psyche,
yeah.
right? Like like I'm a writer, and like I'll see that and I'll be like, oh, how do I? And then I'll like tweet after it being like, obviously I meant the, not, and then people
Yeah.
reply like, Dave, we know, chill out. I'm like, I can't chill out, my brain.
Yeah, that but
Yeah,
they said that that was gonna be rolled out across the entire platform, but, like, Twitter Blue is getting early access to it as sort of a perk, but also, like, a testing
yeah,
sort of thing, and I think maybe even some non-Twitter Blue people were just having it show up. They were actually in the past, like, ever since the initial move,
mhm,
they've been definitely doing a lot more, like, testing of features that come in and out somewhat mysteriously, or, like, the aspect ratio on tweets will change or the font change or something.
mhm.
I assume it's because they had a very, like, the culture when, the previous people were in charge was very, like, plotting, and they weren't trying new things often. So it seems like that changed a little bit. But anyway, yes, so Twitter Blue had
Right.
some bonus sorts of things that you could
Yeah.
get
So
access
it's
to for $5 a month.
right. So it's $5 a month for a bunch of bonus features if you're really into Twitter. And like effectively the way they're trying to now rephrase it is, hey, we're rolling verification into that and it's gonna be $8 a month. Like if you like Twitter, like what a deal. And like honestly, like I teach political communication, like I teach strategic political communication. It is very, very easy to design a communications plan to make that sound appealing to Twitter's user base. Like, hey, we're adding a bunch of cool features. The price is going to go up from $5 a month to $8 a month. And also, we're going to add a pathway for verification for those who aren't verified. And what he did instead was just tweet through it. So, like, the way this came out is it leaked that they were considering getting rid of the verified system. So like celebrities, journalists, public officials won't be verified anymore, like any of them. So they're going to be vulnerable to impersonation, which they won't like. And he says, if you want that, you're going to need to get it through Twitter Blue. At first, they leaked that it's going to be $5 a month. Then they leaked that it's going to be $20 a month in order for verified people to stay verified. Then he starts like yelling at people about it and posting dumb memes. Then
and he got into it with Stephen King also.
Yeah. Stephen King was like, I'm gone like Enron if you do this. And he replied being like, but we need the money. How about $8 a month? Which like, like this is not like, you don't need to be a communications professional to realize like maybe this isn't the way you want to roll this out. Nate Silver had a good comment where like Nate pointed out like, look, I'm probably the target audience of this. I enjoy Twitter. I use it a lot. I have the money, but my reaction is like, like, fuck you, I'm out of here. I've produced enough content for you guys over the year that like, screw you. And like, he's got David Sachs as one of his henchmen, and David Sachs, I think, is an idiot. But like David Sachs, who's like a right-wing troll with $1 billion, keeps saying like, oh, this is about like the elites with their blue checks. Don't like, they're not upset that they're going to lose that they have to pay $8. They're upset that you can get it for $8. And it's like, first of all, no, that's not true. You're an idiot. Second of all, this is the worst way to introduce your program, because now what you're saying is like the status quo was bad and elitist, and this will radically change everything. Come with us in a revolution. Like, of course, that's going to piss off your power users who thought the status quo was at least okay enough for them to be around. Of course, that's going to do advertisers saying, I'm sorry, what the fuck is this thing? And then on top of that, like you're firing half of your staff, raising huge questions about how is content moderation going to work if you don't have anyone left to moderate the content. So like, this is what happens when you just do all this stuff way too fast. If he had taken a month and like had an actual team that said, what's the program going to be? What's the price point? What are all the features? How does this fit into our plan to get rid of bots, like scammers and spammers?
Mm-hmm.
And then presented that as like, here's the future of Twitter in December. Like, he can probably make it sound good, but instead he's like vibrating with anger that he spent so much money for a site he didn't want. And so they're just it's like they're brainstorming random ideas, and before anyone points out that's dumb, it's already been announced and they're already defending it. Like I saw it was posted yesterday. Another one of their ideas is that if you pay money, you'll be able to DM celebrities.
Yes.
Someone pointed out like, right, so how are female celebrities going to feel about that people paying $2 to Twitter to send them dick pics? They're probably not.
How would any celebrity feel about someone paying a couple bucks to send them a message? If I were a celebrity, I would be charging much more than a couple bucks to have my assistant read an email. That's a stupid idea. And apparently Facebook had some version of it, that an old Katie Natopoulos tweet about it resurfaced.
Oh, yeah.
Facebook had some idea that they would do this.
Thought about it, but then they didn't do it.
In 2014. No, it's a stupid idea.
And like, it's fine to have bad ideas and brainstorming, but if in your first week in the company, you're firing everyone, having bad ideas, and then defending them as though everyone else is the idiot, then like you're just being really bad at your job, and you should maybe like take a walk, like chill out. Maybe you try to run one of the other companies.
He's been holding a sink this entire time, so he's obviously extremely
really tired.
He's ready to put that sink down. It's so, I mean, everything like Twitter is okay, in my opinion. Like, Twitter has brought me some good things personally. A lot of the people who I have as guests on my podcast, I connect with through Twitter. I've made some actual friendships through Twitter, and it's, there's been a lot of funny, weird, wacky stuff that has been exposed. I've read or witnessed on Twitter, and that's all good. But looking at it objectively, like, there have been more bad things that Twitter has caused in my life than positive things. And the metaphor I've used is, the alcoholic has had plenty of great times down at the bar, but if the bar like was bulldozed, it would be good for the alcoholic also. So that's how my relationship with the site, and lots of people have lots of different relationships with it. But okay, so one of the strange things about Twitter for so long was it seemed like the people who ran the place had no idea how the app was actually used, or the site was actually used. And they used to say things like, Twitter is where the great discussions happen. And that's not true. Twitter is where like the stupidest discussions on planet Earth happen, and where you you write something and it gets like willfully or unwillfully misinterpreted by strangers who make your life miserable for a short period of time because you posted something about like enjoying having coffee with your husband in the garden every morning. Like just a lot of stupid shit happens on the site, and the site, the way it's designed, probably accidentally because it was, the whole site was sort of an accident the way it happened.
Mhm.
um it just promotes stupidity, extremism, emotionalism, tribalism, us versus them in any category. Um, yeah, I think it's mostly, even if you take Trump out of the picture, I tweeted this earlier,
Mhm.
if Trump had never been born, assessing like the utilitarian calculus on whether Twitter was good for the world or not, it would be like a close call. Add Trump in. It's definitely bad. Do you,
Well, I want to
what do you
push
think
on
about
that a
this?
little bit. So I think the denominator matters a lot, because if I compare Twitter to Facebook, I actually think I see dumber conversations on Facebook than on Twitter.
Mhm.
Um, Facebook is also more useful for, say, organizing insurrections than Twitter. Like the things that I think Twitter is good for, the things that I will hope for in whatever comes after Twitter, after he's turned it into a steaming pile of ghost town. Um, like if I think back to 2008-ish when I'm joining, the thing that made Twitter different from Facebook was that Twitter is unidirectional like follower and followee, and Facebook is bidirectional. And early on, like back when I was a graduate student, that mattered a lot because that meant that the people who I was reading, who I thought were brilliant, and I'm not friends with them. I'm not going to like try to friend the author that I just read on Facebook,
Mhm.
but I can follow them on Twitter, and that allows me to have a curated feed of the other people who, like, it's not exactly a filter bubble, but it is selecting your own filters in terms of, these are people who see the world the way I see it and are thinking interesting thoughts, having interesting conversations. I want to follow the stuff not only that they're writing, but also that they're posting and talking about. And so early in my career, I'm allowed to do that. And that makes Twitter really valuable. The fact that it's unidirectional, so that I don't need to have a relationship with you to engage with your stuff. And then later in my career, once I'm writing more things, like if Twitter goes away, like I'm really enjoying writing for Substack. I'm writing a thing once a week. It's a free Substack. Like there's no like, I'm not like part of the Substacking elite that's making money off that stuff. I just like got a little annoyed that I wasn't writing enough. So I was like, I'm just gonna do that. I'm gonna make myself write once a week. It'll be fun. And if you take Twitter out of the equation, then I'm writing for Substack. It gets emailed to people who have already decided to follow me. And that's it. Like there's no other
Mhm.
way to spread my stuff. So Twitter ends up being very useful for writing the long form thing and then being the place where you can share it. So I would like a thing that does those two things well. And I would like a thing that has good enough content management and like a few other affordances that add friction for like the hate brigades and for like the contextless misinformation and all the other like worst stuff. But like I've seen proposals for like, keep Twitter as it is, but get rid of quote retweets, because quote retweets are for dunking. I do all the
Mhm.
time. I enjoy it. It's not me at my best self. Like you take out the quote retweet, um, you add in content moderation staff with a senior leadership that has a backbone, so that when you point out, hey, look, this person is a harassing Nazi, the content moderators who say, hey, you're right, have bosses who say, yep, that's right, you can go with it. That problem could have gotten solved if Jack Dorsey had sort of stronger values than he had as a non-libertarian.
Mhm.
So like you can fix that with like well-staffed content moderation. And you need to not expect to make too much money, since advertising isn't, like, I think advertising, now that we're in a tech crash, I think digital ads are probably going to take a hit because there's actually fewer companies trying to advertise, and they're noticing like, hey, there isn't as much money in this as we thought. That's one of the aftershocks that happened after the 2000 crash, is like all the big tech magazines that were rolling in ads either shrank or shut down. So like you want to not expect to make too much money doing that. But a system that does those three things is, I think, on net good, particularly for comparing them to like Facebook. Like, sure, I guess I could post my Substacks on Facebook, and then like my cousin-in-law 3 times removed and argue with like a senior academic in my subfield because they're both seeing it and like we have a context collapse where they both think they should be talking with me on my page. Like the structure of Facebook isn't, I think, is actually like much worse than the structure of Twitter for having interesting conversations. Not to say that Twitter comes anywhere near living up. It's like up to this billing of like the public square. Like it's not. But if we were required to pick one social media space and say that's the public square, like Twitter is probably the least bad option that we have.
Oh, that's interesting because I've said this directly on Twitter that
Mhm.
Facebook is the public square. People, I mean, normal people are generally not on Twitter. Normal people are on Facebook.
Mhm.
Like normal people do want to see photos of their cousins' babies and stuff like that. They don't generally want to debate politics in their spare time. And yeah, I have a theory that like Twitter's active user base in America is like fewer than like 3 million people.
So
And
I think you're right, but I think you're describing Facebook from 7 years ago. Like Facebook 7 years ago was I can see like my old high school friends like kid photos. I still like Facebook for that. Like Facebook as a self-updating Rolodex, awesome. Facebook as it became after it went public and realized that it needed to feed an engagement engine in order to print money, became a place where it's basically the loudest, most obnoxious person that you've ever met, yelling at people on a page. And at this point, it's like Facebook's mostly boomers at this point. Like it's mostly like
I
grandparents.
should say I deactivated my Facebook account about 2 years ago and haven't been on since. So so
Like I think you're absolutely right. Like the ideal of Facebook 7 years, like or the experience of Facebook like 7, 8 years ago. I think you're right that that's much closer to a digital public square. But the Facebook that we've had for several years now, which is just becoming sort of like cranky boomerville because of changes to their algorithms, because that's what was driving more engagement. Like that, it turned into a much junkier experience that is, I think, definitely poorer than Twitter of 6 months ago.
okay, so whenever, I'm talking to someone who is not on Twitter, I mean, this happens less, but over the past couple of years, especially when Trump was using it a lot, whenever I was talking to someone who was not on Twitter, they would say, "Should I get on Twitter?" I would say, "No. It's not worth it. It's not worth your time." And it has all these, it sort of like breaks your brain in various ways if you do get into it. So I think that like, probably if I went back and asked these people, are you, what did you do? The people who did not join Twitter probably would be happier with their lives today than the people who disregarded my advice. So there's that. But then, I'm off Facebook as well. So yeah, I mean, it sort of seems like you could have something like Twitter that was not being run for profit. That was some like Wikipedia version of Twitter.
Or
Um,
it's running for profit, just lower profits. Like I think it should be for profit, just have lower expectations so big money doesn't ruin everything.
Right. And at some point, Twitter apparently has lost money 8 of the past 10 years, but it
Mhm,
did make some amount of money like in 2020 or 2021. But it
mhm,
was something like the revenue was like 1.5 billion, but they only made like 20 million or something. So I was like, well, first of all, how did Twitter make this much money? And second of all, what are they actually spending it on? Because the site does not work really that well. And also, who would actually pay for a Twitter ad? Like, maybe I'm more anti ad than the average person, but I've
mhm,
only ever been annoyed by Twitter ads or clicked on them accidentally. It seems like such a bad value proposition for a
mhm,
company. The fact that GM advertises on Twitter to begin with, seems like a waste of money. And maybe they're just doing it because other big companies are too, and they feel like they're losing out. And maybe a lot of people have been wondering whether the entire advertising model is sort of a like fail, it was a fail system to begin with, and advertisements never really worked very well. And it's just with the fact that you can track clicks now that we see that they weren't working, whereas before when it was just print or TV, if you start an ad and sales rose by 5%, you said, well, it's because we had this great ad. And if
mhm,
sales did not rise, you say, well, we didn't have a good enough ad. So yeah, okay. Well, you mentioned like what could we do to fix Twitter? I actually had a sub 280 character solution for this.
mhm,
And one of my suggestions was banning quote tweets.
mhm,
Another one was you can't reply to someone unless you followed them for some length of time. I said 72 hours. And so that would, reduce just random people replying to each other and starting fights.
mhm,
Um, and then the third one was charge 5 cents per tweet. Now, that was somewhat tongue in cheek,
Boo, boo.
but I think that is the real way to have this be like a company that stays in the black, but also like is not insane. So that would solve the spam problem, because spammers are not. So let's say you get 10 or 20 free tweets per day or something like that.
Okay.
But if you're charging per tweet,
Mhm.
then I'm not gonna, like, I'm just thinking about like my incentives and why I waste so much time on here. I'm not gonna like tell a stranger eat shit if it costs me 5 cents. And I assume there's gonna be fewer people who want to tell me to eat shit, or send me an image of a swastika or something if it costs them 5 cents. What do you think of this like modest proposal?
So I just today, let me pull up the crankiest thing that I wrote today, since I am quite proud of it. This was in response to Elon Musk whining about how he says that the reason why advertisers are leaving Twitter is because of like activists are scaring them away, and this is
Right.
he's like basically trying to say like, oh no, I and Twitter are being cancel cultured, which like
Yeah, he's blaming the woke mob for the fact that GM is like suspending ads on Twitter.
yeah. So I replied to that and said, do you worry that everyone is going to realize that you're a fucking idiot who set 44 billion on fire? You should probably worry more that everyone is going to realize that you're a fucking idiot who set $44 billion on fire.
Okay, so you would
Like,
pay 5 cents. That was worth 5 cents to you to tweet that?
what I would say is, amongst all the things that I tweet, I'm probably more likely to spend 5 cents for the psychic gratification of a real burn to somebody who's annoying me than for my like offering up insights on like one of the things that I routinely tweet, because I'm for the second time rereading the entire back catalog of Wired magazine for work. And so occasionally I'll like find a thing in Wired magazine from 1994 that I think is like funny or interesting. Like the product reviews from 1994, I find like I get a little bit out of like seeing those and being like, wow, I want to show this to somebody. I wouldn't spend 5 cents to share with people like my Wired archive tweets, because I think 6 other people care about that, and I just kind of enjoy sharing it.
Mhm.
But like the psychic joy of delivering a solid burn, like yeah, that's worth 5 cents. Like maybe that makes me a bad person, but there's a lot of bad people out there, and I think the like sharing random pretty earnest observations because you feel like sharing them, that's something which if you're adding the friction of charging me, I'm probably not going to share those. But then like yelling you're a dick to somebody who I think is a dick, like yeah, yeah, like absolutely I'm gonna spend 5 cents on that, because like that feels good to me.
Okay, and I should say that I replied to Elon's tweet where he said Twitter has had a massive drop in revenue. I replied, "You took a massive drop in the toilet, you dummy." No, I would
Yeah,
not have paid 5 cents to
you
tweet
wouldn't
that.
that
I
okay,
don't think I
well,
would have. No, I will say that one of the perversely good things about Twitter is it's one of the places where you could actually say fuck you to a famous or rich person, which
right,
is not something that the average person could do before the internet, because, you wouldn't like see them in real life.
right.
And you could write them like a letter that said fuck you, but that would take a lot of time. And you have to like buy a stamp and go to the mailbox and stuff. But is this good? Okay, I participate in the absurd discourse of discourse, quote unquote, the
Mhm,
absurd antics that happen on Twitter.
mhm.
This is not cultivating the like best part of my, inner character. Like this is making me like lash out and act like a troll. Like the site encourages people to act in generally antisocial ways. If we're saying fuck you to Elon Musk, that feels good. If we're saying fuck
Mhm.
you to a stranger, it just would have been better if I had never gained knowledge of this stranger's existence, and that was like a better reality. um and it just makes people mad all the time. And one thing that Twitter revealed to me is that, I used to think if you were mad, it
Mhm,
would feel better to get less mad, but there's a lot
mhm.
of people who like being mad and they like staying mad, and Twitter incentivizes, like, that's how it gets people hooked, is because they get mad, and that's like, that's not good for people's mental health. And the fact that it's monetized, it like adds this sick aspect to it.
So the,
How does that strike you?
the thing I want to push you on is, in a world without Twitter, like I think you're using Twitter there as a stand-in for all social media. Like if Twitter goes away, then what most people are doing is looking at Instagram or TikTok instead. Um, Now, part of what I really like about Twitter, another thing that I would want on a Twitter replacement, is I really need text rather than video, because like I have two small kids who at the end of a like long day or on a Saturday, like they will want to watch Daniel Tiger or Pink Pong. And if they're watching a Baby Shark cartoon, I am going to sit there with them. I can't like put headphones in and watch a TikTok. Like
Hmm.
that I'm not going to do. But I'm definitely going to divert a little bit of my attention to look at Twitter. And like, yeah, I'm probably a little meaner on Twitter that day because, like, my God, Baby Shark, or Coco Melon. My God, Coco Melon. Like, like that's probably going to make me a little meaner, not because Twitter, but because Coco Melon.
Uh-huh.
Um, but like the ability to read text and occasionally use that to open up an article that like that somebody posted or somebody's discussing, like I think that's good. But also, what I'd say is the bad stuff you're talking about is all also true on Instagram. It's all also true on TikTok. Those are, I think, even more monetized since they're also paying creators. So there's an incentive to like actively lash out and build a mob on those other sites because it'll get you rich in a way that, again, like Twitter fame isn't directly good for anything. Like if people are doing Substack for money, then they're going to do Twitter antics in order to
Yeah,
drive
that's
up revenue.
a lot of Substack monetization seems to be based around saying provocative things on Twitter and
Yeah,
stirring shit up, and
yeah. Like
it's sort of
Substack rating is real. Is real. Like I've seen it happen. There is a specific liberal writer whose podcast I liked a lot, and then he went to Substack, and I like him less
Mhm.
because now like he's responding to his incentives. Um, so like that's all real, and Twitter fits into that. But if Twitter disappears and instead the Substackers are trying to make a go of it on TikTok and on YouTube and
I've
on
heard that Glenn Greenwald is actually a really good dancer,
I was
and
not talking about Glenn Greenwald. He's a
okay, I see what you mean. And I've never downloaded TikTok. It sort of scares me in its addictive
Mhm.
qualities. I feel
Yeah.
like it's for kids, and kids doing little skits, and but obviously lots of older people are using it as well. So I can't say anything about that. I mean, Instagram. It seems Instagram has its own toxic aspects, and some of those are related more to like body image or feeling like you're there's like a lot people are having an enjoyable life out there that you don't have access to. So those are bad. The specific toxicities of Twitter, I don't know exactly what they probably go more to Facebook than to Instagram, because I don't know if people are really like on Instagram like getting into deep arguments in the comments. Maybe that's happening. I'm sure it's happening in some places.
I think again,
It's easier to have a positive experience, I think, on Instagram than on Twitter, where even like normal interactions end up trending extremely negative.
I'm not really on Instagram, so I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that was more true of Instagram like 5 years ago than now. Like I think Instagram now, again, because of the monetization and because of the ways they've tried to goose engagement by uh by kind of becoming a mini TikTok. Like I'm pretty sure that if like the two of us as an experiment said like let's both spend a week just on Twitter and then a week just on Instagram and then a week just on TikTok,
Hmm.
and like we would both come back mortified. But I think if we then forced ourselves to rank them, I think we would end up thinking higher of Twitter. I think we would come back and be like, oh, if Twitter is awful for the psyche, like the other options out there that would replace it are kind of gaping maws of terror as well.
Okay, but in some way, this is damning with faint praise. Like, would you like
Yeah,
to eat one pile of shit or drink a jar of piss, sort of thing? Like,
yeah. Like let's be
they
clear,
seem to
like
all be negative.
look, it's 2022, and as a political scientist, let me know, like we might be like losing American democracy effectively in 5 days. Like the world, like it's the 20, like this is a bad decade we're entering in. Like every year of the 2020s has been bad in some way. So
Yes.
like yeah, there's not an option that isn't terrible. Look, like we live in
Okay, so
dystopia.
we should be thankful for our jar of piss that at least it's we're getting hydrated from.
I mean, like at the least we should be like, well, like there wasn't an option for healthy food here. So while I don't want to say like yay jars of piss, I do want to say like let's not pretend that if we don't drink the jar of piss that we actually get to have like a normal beer. Normal beer, that's like a like Obama era thing. That is in the past now, my friend. We're so far away from
Okay,
normal.
well, okay, so I've had a sort of fantasy vision of Twitter like being either run into the ground that's so toxic that everyone normal including myself, perhaps not legitimately in the category of normal leads. So it's sort of becomes a 4chan or something. And
Mhm.
then it's sort of like the last scene in the Truman Show, where
Yeah.
the show ends and people suddenly like look outside the window and realize, oh, like I could be doing something else with my life.
Wait,
And the
okay.
way you're talking makes it seem like people would just be drawn to TikTok or some new thing that has its own set of issues.
So here, and like one of us is right, the other is wrong here. Because I was also thinking Truman Show, but I remember the end of it differently. I thought at the end of the Truman Show, people pause for a second and then say, "What else is on?"
Okay, you're right. I think that is the final line. What else is on?
And like that's like because like that's the different like if you're right that Twitter falling apart would lead us all to like go touch grass and read some books, then that seems like probably a net benefit for society. But my hunch is that if Twitter falls apart, and again, like I unfortunately I think it will. Like I like it more than the other sites. It fits pretty well into my routines, and while my routines aren't great, like they could certainly be worse. Like I don't think he's gonna pull this thing out and salvage it. And my worry is that at the end of that, when people say, "Okay, what else is on?" I my worry is that what comes next is worse.
Certainly, that's been the pattern over the past couple of years. Is that you think it can't get worse, and then it does. Okay, we've talked a lot about Twitter, and maybe more than we should have. But I did want to at least briefly bring up that other famous website that we mentioned before. Although I think we've mostly been calling it Facebook, is actually the company is called Meta, and you've been writing about Meta and the Metaverse and Zuckerberg, and yeah, he seems to be having his own troubles, and they're plowing all this money into the virtual reality concept. And actually, Farhad Manjur just published a piece today where he used the top of the line Oculus, whatever, was trying the metaverse, and he was like, "Where did they? There's no evidence that they spent $10 billion on this. Like, it's not, it's
Mhm.
almost nothing. There's no one here. It's suppressing. Like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
What do you think is happening with Meta slash Facebook?
So look, the first thing that I want to make clear is it is very, very funny that like if we go back 3 years ago, I would have very confidently told you that Facebook is a monopoly that will like basically the sun will basically never set on. Like not never, but like they have so much market power and they have been allowed to acquire so many competitors that they're just going to dominate and keep dominating. The idea that what is going to bring them down is Mark Zuckerberg believing a fantasy that everyone really wants to live in virtual reality slash augmented reality, and that he's just gonna like he's gonna spend all of the money to build and dominate that next space and just being wrong about it. Like that's funny. Like he spent $10 billion last year, and the announcement after a year of that was legs are coming soon to the metaverse.
Yes.
Um, and the so I wrote a piece, God, last summer 2021, that I wrote just before he made the announcement that they were shifting to Meta and shifting to the metaverse. So I wrote this piece basically snarking at VR, calling it the rich white kid of technology. And again, this comes out of this big history project I've been doing, studying the history of the digital future, because I was reading about the old wave of VR technologies in the late 80s and early 90s. And then that's in like early Wired magazine. And then in late Wired magazine, I was reading about Oculus and how once again they were saying this is going to change everything in the next 5 years. And they were saying that in like 2014, 2016. So in 2021, I looked and I was like, yeah, they're still saying like at some point, are they ever going to judge this technology on its results instead of its potential?
Hmm.
And in particular, if after the pandemic, when everyone was literally shut inside, if VR games still aren't more popular than other games, maybe that just means that VR gaming is like very niche and most people aren't all that into it. Like maybe it's just not going to happen, guys, because people don't want it.
Hmm.
Um, so I wrote that piece, and just after I wrote that, he was like, "Yeah, we're going to spend like $10 billion building this thing." And it was a real gut check of like, I'm going to look very stupid when I made a prediction of this will never happen. And then he was like, I'm going to spend all my money proving Karp wrong. Um, but like now it's a year later, it's like, no, you spent all your money and nobody likes this thing. And he's going to spend he's planning to spend $15 billion next year. Like I think the technology is going to get smoother and smoother. And like 50 years from now, my guess is some of that will have broken through. particularly because, you know, unless we are like a Mad Max, like full post-apocalyptic mode, like the place we'll be in as a world 50 years from now is we're going to be traveling a lot. Like we're going to have far fewer plane flights. So like I think telepresence meanings like with VR or AR, if you spend 50 years building that, then yes, someday that may end up being more useful as we adjust to climate destabilization.
So you're saying
But
we're going to have a lot fewer plane flights because the price of gas is going to go up so much, or because
yeah,
governments are going
like
to limit
I mean, like I'm not
flights,
sure what
or?
the mechanisms will be. This is 50 years out, but
Hmm.
50 years out, we will not be able, like, you just can't be burning nearly the fuels that we are now.
Hmm.
Like, pretty hard to put planes in the air, at least right now, it's pretty hard to put planes in the air without burning just a ton of gas. So, yeah, my guess is that if we're looking decades and decades into the future, my hunch is that some of the changes that we'll see to society, like when I'm a great grandparent, basically, those are changes that I imagine might fit with VR. So there might be use cases that exist 2 generations from now.
Hmm.
But like in the next 5, 10 years, like Mark Zuckerberg is going to melt his entire empire down, chasing a dream that nobody wants. And that's like it, given that the place that we were in like 2015 or so was hailing all of these technologists as like world historic geniuses who just are like brilliant, omniscient, have it all figured out. Like seeing that myth punctured so publicly as we watch these same human beings, both Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, be like, I'm a genius. Everyone's gonna go with me, right? And then everyone like, nah man, that sucks. And then a year later, us being like, no, it still sucks. Stop doing that. Like that is at least like if we're gonna live in a dystopia, we should find fun, we should find humor where we can. Like that's
Yeah,
fun.
it's the hubris of these guys, and it's also sort of like, I mean, I was thinking about this. The two uh, tech people who have put themselves as personas or personalities out there the most are the people we've been talking about, Musk and Zuckerberg. And they both seem very obviously like psychically damaged man children who act in ways. I mean, Zuckerberg less so than Musk, who acts like a petulant teenager. Um, but the things that Zuckerberg seems to want things that like a child would want or something, and he's also extremely strange person. I don't know. It like if you compare them to like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates or something, who were tech titans of their day, made a shit ton of money. But I don't know. I mean, they're obviously like nerds, but they seemed more like adults or something, um, than these clowns who have like lucked into all this into these jackpots now. I don't know. There's definitely like they're getting worse, rather than getting better.
So for me, this again goes back to this big money ruins everything theme. That like I think a version of Mark Zuckerberg who's worth like $20 million, like I think I probably end up finding at least kind of charming. Because he's like this like weird, very techie guy. Like, like sure, he's not like the average dude, but I like non-average dudes personally. And he's like got strange views of the world, some of which work and some of which don't. Like, I don't like it if he is being treated as a Roman Empire and has the wealth as a Roman emperor and has the wealth and power that we kind of have to take him seriously that way. Like that's too much power for that particular person.
Hmm.
If he's like just a millionaire because he built a company that worked really well, like cool. Like I think I'm probably fine with him. Um, and like Musk, like I don't like the part of what I find interesting with him is if we go back a decade ago, the like persona that he had built, the myth making he had done, I think there's a strong argument 10 years ago that he is his generation's Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs and like Elon Musk likes to pretend that he's a real engineer, like he's a rocket scientist. Like he's not, he's an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Steve Jobs is also like not much of a coder. Steve Jobs is or was a product visionary and a really obnoxious boss who could often see a couple steps ahead, and inspired as much as he graded on people.
Hmm.
And like, to his credit, like he bent the arc of history. Like he did it a couple times. While there's also a bunch of critiques out there, including you didn't build it, you got people to build it. Um, And like part of what's always stood out to, or for the past year or so has stood out to me about Musk is, rather than being his generation Steve Jobs, like Musk has insisted on being treated both as Jobs and Wozniak. Like he
Hmm.
really like forces people to pretend as though he's the guy building the tunnels and the rockets and the cars and now the social media sites. And like instead of being an entrepreneurial visionary and like just doing the one thing, he keeps on insisting that we treat him as though he's like just a singular genius of all history. And like that's where the comeuppance is coming from. And again,
Yes.
like if he only had $50 million, I wouldn't have to care about him. But when he has 200 billion, then all of a sudden all this stuff matters.
Yes. And there's something, I don't care about these people individually. There's something about like a tragic human dimension that whatever you have is not enough. And
Mhm,
so even being the richest person on earth, he still wants more. And this
mhm,
this is similar to, I mean, there's a similarities to Trump here of never being satisfied and constantly wanting more and more and more and not seeming like a happy person. Trump seems more miserable than Musk. But yeah, it's like, I'm sure there's a lot of people, not a lot. There's plenty of people who are, comfortably wealthy and are not grasping always for more. But both of these, Zuckerberg could have ridden Facebook and the fact that he like helped destroy print media and took over their advertising revenue. Like could have ridden that into retirement, but felt
mhm.
like, yeah, his hubris, his ego, something meant that he had to like conquer new worlds. And Musk is like a sociopath who needs attention constantly. And yeah, even being there's some like Buddhist lesson here or something, like even having everything, you still crave more. And in both these cases, it seems like they're getting some sort of Greek tragic downfall, but they've become so powerful that they're like dragging other things along with them.
Yeah,
And of course, like, Musk terminated 3,500 jobs, and those people now have to like find a new way to pay the rent and so forth. So, yeah, it's bad. It's
yeah.
bad overall.
The comparison that comes to mind here, or for me, is like off the top of my head, I don't know what Sergey Brin and Larry Page have been up to.
Yes, I've thought about that too.
Right? Like they've also got all of the money, and it's not that they're not hatching new scheme. Like like they turned like Google turned into Alphabet. It has launched a bunch of different things, some of which I probably like, and some of which probably would worry me a ton. But in general, the need to continue conquering the next realm and being hailed as like the generational genius at least seems absent enough from them that they're like not insisting on being in our faces all the time. Like
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen a Sergey Brin tweet, right? Like he doesn't need to do
I
that.
couldn't pick either of them out of a lineup. They did not feel
Yeah.
like they needed to impose their personalities on society in the way that Musk and Zuckerberg and Jack, to some extent, Jack Dorsey
Mhm.
did. And yeah, and there's been a joke that, you know, MySpace Tom, the guy who created
Right.
MySpace, sold to, was it
Murdoch, yeah.
yeah, sold to Murdoch and cashed out and then like got really into hang gliding or something like that. And we've not heard much from him recently. So he's like living on, he seems to be happily like enjoying his wealth and yet not trying to bend the course of history or whatever. And of course, like he, you know, got out on top. And MySpace is, essentially became essentially worthless very quickly thereafter. So, taking Rupert Murdoch's money and using it to hang glide around the world or whatever, that's good. But yeah, some of these personality types, they just can't, they can't like accept what they what they have, even when it's almost everything.
Yeah, and it's really, and again for me, like there are plenty of personality types that annoy me, and it's not a problem so long as they aren't also billionaires trying to conquer the world.
Hmm.
Like Elon could be exactly the person he is, and if you like, if again, if he had $20 million and his thing was trying to build space rockets to go to Mars, like that's not my jam, but I wouldn't care about it. Like, okay, sure, like somebody gets to have that vision, and if you're pursuing that, then like good for you, man. Like that's like I'm fine with that type of capitalism. when you have $200 billion and you've decided that the entire world needs to clap for you at all times while you build rockets to Mars, then I get deeply concerned about the way you're bending society. Like, Sergey Brin is super rich. Like, maybe he's an awful dude. I have no idea. But the fact that I don't have any idea is kind of nice because it means that he's not forcing me to think about him all the time, at least.
Yes, and in the attention economy, that is that is something. No, I actually just Googled what he looks like today. I wouldn't have pictured him in my mind at all, even though the Google founders have changed changed modern life more than more than Facebook and Musk's efforts have, I think. Okay, we've gone longer than I thought we would. But is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Um, no, let's talk like 8 months from now about whatever has happened with AI. Because right now it
Hmm.
looks like AI is conquering the world. And 8 months from now, either AI will have conquered the world or there's going to be some smart insights about what limitations it ran into. So
Okay,
like,
that's just, yeah. I saw you had a post where you were skeptical of Web3, AI, and was crypto the other thing you were skeptical of, or
well, so Web3 is crypto. It's
okay,
Web3, AI, and Metaverse are
Metaverse. Okay,
so in 2021, those are the three big visions of the tech future. And the thing that I'm real cranky about is all three of those assume that somebody else will solve the climate crisis. Like, none of those are actually a solution to like the world historic challenge facing all.
and some exacerbate the
Yeah, so like some, yeah,
crypto in
like the,
particular.
my yeah, and my joke with AI as well is like DALI 2 is pretty cool, the image generator, but it is kind of like what we are hearing from the like the UN Secretary General is like, we have a whole of society problem right now to respond to climate change, and the response is like, well, we burned down a rainforest to teach a neural net to draw a duck. Does that help?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so and like I also like in general, while there's new things happening with AI, whereas both Metaverse and Web3 are like kind of already crapping out, my guess is pretty quickly we're gonna run into the stark limitations of that. So like there's nothing to say about that today, but like I can definitely talk to you for 45 minutes about that, like mid 2023. And
Okay, that's interesting. It does, yeah. I mean, of the three, it does seem from the get go like a more promising thing. But yeah, what is it actually good for? And whereas, yeah, like crypto seems like it's only good to like commit crimes or scam various people. Um,
it's mostly good for speculation, and now the
right.
speculation is going away. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you continue to be on Twitter. Have you thought about leaving, or are you riding it?
I mean, again, like until there is another thing that allows me to do unidirectional following, share my work with a national and global audience, and is easy to scroll through while my kids are watching Daniel Tiger. I'm on Twitter. I mean, like that's the use case. Those are the use cases I'm fitting into. Nothing else is better, so I'm there even as it's a train wreck.
Okay, I did a poll among
Mhm.
my small Twitter, fandom, and saying, are you going to leave, stay, or unsure? And
Mhm.
leave was 5%, stay was 45, unsure 50.
Mhm.
Um, so I think a lot of people are going to see what happens, and yeah, but it's possible that the site may just stop functioning literally in the way that it used to, like go offline for hours at a time,
Yeah.
and and then I guess we'll have the choice of whether we check Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, or you know, touch
Or
grass,
watch Coco Melon.
read a
Like,
book,
I'll have to
watch a
watch
TV
Coco
show.
Melon. It'd be terrible. If
um,
you're, I want to be clear, if any of your listeners don't know what Coco Melon is, do not find out. It's bad for you. Don't let your kids find out about it. I'm doing you a solid
I've
here.
heard other parents of
Go
young
away.
children say that it's like the most mind numbing
Oh my
thing
God.
imaginable.
It breaks you so quick. It breaks you.
Okay, so the Substack is yourname.substack.com, and things will be linked in the show notes to that and the ones that we discussed in particular. And your Twitter is also your first name, last name. My Twitter is REACW. I'm staying on there for now, but I do sort of anticipate a moment of freedom, and that, but then maybe I'll say what else is on, and I'll just start watching TV a lot more than I've was doing before. Which I think it's funny thinking back on all the like cultural critique around television and like
Mhm.
David Foster Wallace's essays about television and how addictive it was. And like, boy, they didn't know what was coming. Like,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
can't, when you yell at the people on TV, they don't like, they don't react. And being able to get a reaction as someone, it turns out, is very appealing for a lot of people.
It is
Okay.
always a good time to reread or read for the first time Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that they were prescient, but it was just they didn't realize that TV was the wasn't the medium that was going to come along
Yeah.
that would like capture attention in this obsessed way.
Good news, it gets worse.
Yeah, it's only getting worse. Okay, on that optimistic note, thank you, Dave, for coming on. Thanks to the listeners. They can rate, they can review, tell a friend, other such things, or they could just go for a walk, touch grass, spend time with a loved one, whatever. Um, okay, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks. This is fun.